what Americans really want from India. For instance, just recently, Senator Marco Rubio brought a bill saying that, okay, we should give everything to India, and we should also have we should also activate the CARTSA Act. We should not activate the CARTSA Act where even India wants to buy S-400 or what else it wants to buy. We shouldn't stop India. So, what's so specific? Do you believe that Indians want, the Americans want that there will come a time India will stand against China? So, are the Americans preparing India for China in any military conflict, which they do believe? Just the presidential candidate Donald Trump saw that I see a war in Asia being shown. Recently, he gave a statement. So, what Americans really want from India is just China, or the new institutional architecture or the military architecture which they want to install is something like that?
No, that's a really good question. And, well, I'm going to set aside what former President Donald Trump says, because we have to sort of take that with a grain of salt, because he's in campaign mode and he has his way of saying things that don't necessarily translate into policy. Even under his administration, we saw the huge gap between campaign promises and actual policy deliverables. So that aside, to answer your question, I think the Americans realize that India is not at a point where it can play a very big role well, let's just say Indo-Pacific, but particularly the Western Pacific Basin. I'm talking pure military terms here. The evidence for that is manifold. So there's a reason why there's something called AUKUS, which is, Australia, UK, and US. There's another relationship that involves the Japanese, another one with the Philippines. And these are all cropping up, in the last several months to maximum a year. Why isn't India part of that? India is not part of that because India has yet to sort of project maritime power, naval power in the Indian Ocean basin. So to expect it to go and play a role in the Pacific is getting ahead of yourself, way ahead of yourself. And so I think India will take its time. And I would add that, just like a few days ago, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense both announced jointly that there is going to be, a beefing up of the U.S. investment in military bases in northern Australia, and of course the Philippines as well. So why is this happening? So why isn't India in this picture? The reason is simple, is that India is not at that level just yet. There is another problem that the Americans, I think, recognize, which is that China, through its sort of what I call strategic poking on the Himalayan frontier between China and India, is distracting India from playing that kind of military role. Now, the Indians are definitely reorganizing, their military command structure. There's an ambitious plan to overhaul and spend more money on the Navy than historically they've done. So they have this naval command in Karwar in the southwest coast of India. And so they're developing that. They have a command structure in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. But these are all just getting, going. They're nascent efforts. They're not there yet. They will take time. For a country to, become a naval power of any worth takes time. It's not just the acquisition of hardware. And this is where I think many American policymakers tend to, or commentators tend to overestimate China, where, they have far more ships than we do. We need to build more ships. That is true. But then there's the question of quality. And then there's the question of humanware. China doesn't have the experience of blue water navigation. And the United States has close to 200 years of experience. So these things need to be factored in. Now, coming back to India, India is just getting started on this process. So that is why I think that the United States is mindful, and it's allowing India to take its time. Now, the Indians are also looking at what's happening to Russia, and they are wondering. They have to be wondering that if this present trend continues, then how reliable is Russia as a supplier of military hardware for India? So they are also thinking of reducing their dependency on Russia. I mean, if Russia has to reach out to Iran and North Korea, I mean, we're talking about the second largest military of the world with its own industrial base and its own platforms, and they're not bad, and they're pretty good. I mean, this is from the legacy, comes from the Soviet era. So if that's what's happening, and there are already delays in deliveries of certain systems to the Indians, so the Indians have to say, okay, we need to chart a course out of this dependency. Let's see who else we can acquire from. But that's a slow process because you can't, in the short term, jump from one platform, which is Russian in this case, to Western platforms. So these are challenges, and I think India needs time. It needs shakedown time. It needs a longer runway to become that player. So that's why I think it's a realistic outlook from Washington.